Good morning, everyone, once again. If you came in through the front entrance to the building, you were greeted by Mark and Elizabeth, and I noticed that they were not only handing out bulletins, but free hugs, too. Everybody was getting a hug. It was beautiful, and I was wondering, for some people, how long does that hug have to last? Not everybody has hugs available at where they live, so it's beautiful to see that. You can take the message outline from your bulletin. As we go through life, there are potential pitfalls that will push us off of the spiritual pathway and keep us from reaching our destination of heaven. There are a lot of Christians who start off great. They're enthusiastic, they're energetic, they're ready to go, but they end poorly because they were not prepared for distractions along the way. So we're going to begin by looking at 3 pitfalls that can distract you. I was going to call them large potholes. I'm not sure if there's so many potholes in the deep south as there are up in the Midwest where there is more freezing and thawing, but here are some potholes, some pitfalls that we need to be aware of. Number 1, you tell me if this could be a distraction. Culture. Cultural distractions. That could be a pitfall. I think I can summarize this point in one sentence. I've narrowed it down, trimmed it down to one sentence, and here it is. If you plan on doing anything spiritually significant in your life, it's going to be in spite of culture and not because of it. Now, there are 4 cultural distractions that will prevent you from reaching your spiritual goals of Christ likeness and heaven. So just be aware of these. Number 1, living only for pleasure. Living only for pleasure. You can circle the word only. There is more to life than feeling good and fun. That's certainly a part of it. But that is not the totality of our existence as human beings. That can be a distraction. Number 2, the desire for unlimited material goods. You can circle the key word unlimited. Nothing wrong with material goods. We understand that. Our society judges success by how much you have. And the more you have physically, the more our society says you are a success. Americans represent 5% of the world's population. Our 330 million people out of 7 billion represents 5%. In other words, 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States, yet the 5% here consume 1/4, 25% of the world's energy. Now listen, that's neutral. I'm not making a moral statement about it. That's not good, that's not bad. Just be aware that Jesus warned us that life does not consist in the abundance of things that we possess. 3, the need for social status. Sometimes we are more worried about our Facebook status than our status with God. 4, an overwhelming love for money. Keyword, overwhelming. Nothing wrong with money. Money is great. The Bible says take a risk, invest, make money. Nothing wrong with money. But be aware of Jesus' warning in Matthew 6 that we cannot equally serve God and money at the same time. Now, I like the way this guy put it in his quote. Did I give you the quote? Yes. I did? Okay, good. I think this is great. I think it illustrates the biblical principle. Money is only a tool. It will take you wherever you want to go, but it won't replace you as the driver. Now, here's what I think he's saying. Money is neutral, but you have to decide how you're going to use your money or if your money is going to use you. Either way, you are in the driver's seat. You are the one who is making the decision on whether money is going to be a good thing or it's going to be a pitfall. So be aware of cultural distractions. And then number two, the second pitfall, tempting shortcuts. Now I'm going to explain what I mean by tempting shortcuts. I'm not talking about a faster way to eat a donut. That could be a tempting shortcut, I suppose, but that's not what I have in mind. I want God to be happy with me, but I don't want to spend a lot of time doing a bunch of religious activities. I want minimal involvement, but maximum reward. See, that's the tempting shortcut. We want the benefits of Christianity, but not necessarily the commitment and hard work that goes with it. So beware of tempting shortcuts. And then pitfall 3, discouraging delays. Discouraging delays. Whatever you want to accomplish in your life from a spiritual or physical perspective is going to be met with delays, difficulties, detours, and dead ends. And it even happened in the life of the Apostle Paul. You would figure with these apostles that they had it going on, that everything would flow smoothly. Not always. In Acts chapter 16, Paul wanted to go and preach, and we'll just call it by its modern name, Turkey. It's called Asia in the Bible, but I don't want to say Asia because you might be thinking of Thailand or Vietnam or something. But he wanted to go and preach in Turkey, but he was prevented from doing so. I don't know how it happened. Maybe there was a landslide. Maybe there was an earthquake. They have a lot of earthquakes in that part of the world. Maybe there was a flooded river. Somehow he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do, so he ended up going in another direction. So be aware that there can be discouraging delays. Now the antidote to these pitfalls is found in Genesis chapter 6 through 9 in the story of Noah and the flood. There are 4 observations from Noah that will help us not to be distracted in our spiritual lives and keep on the pathway to heaven. Now, Romans 15:4, it says that, we'll call it the Old Testament. The Old Testament was written for our learning, for our instruction, and for our encouragement. And so as we look at Noah, I'm not really interested so much in the historical event as I am in the principles that can be found in his life, in his story, that transcend the many centuries and apply to us today. We're looking for the eternal principles as we talk about not being distracted by culture. So antidote number 1. My moral values must not be set by culture. My moral values must not be set by culture. Now, for the most part, and I'm speaking broadly, culture is headed one way and God's spiritual pathway another. You have to choose which direction you're going to go. In Noah's day, the human race had hit rock bottom and become morally bankrupt. So in Genesis 6:12, God observed all this corruption in the world, and he saw violence and depravity everywhere. Does any of this sound vaguely familiar to today's world? Corruption, violence, depravity. Chapter 6, verse 5. When the Lord saw the extent of human wickedness, and that the trend and direction, I chose the Living Bible paraphrase just for this, and that the trend and direction of men's lives were only towards evil, he was sorry he had made them, it broke his heart. Now, I'd like for you to circle trend and direction. Listen, we're only a few thousand years into the human race since Adam and Eve, if we follow Bishop Ussher's 16th century work, the chronology of the Bible, which I think is generally good, although people who don't believe in the Bible like to mock this guy and make fun of him, although he was a master of 16 languages, and that was back before they had Rosetta Stone and Babel. He was a master of all kinds of languages, and he put together, and he has this happening about 2,200 years after Adam and Eve. It didn't take long, folks. He grabbed the fruit, got kicked out of the garden. It started heading downhill. So it's already broken by sin. But let me ask this question. What is the trend and direction of society today? Is it generally toward God or away from God? No, I'd say away from God. I'm glad you all answer exactly the way I'm thinking you're going to answer. I don't know what I'm going to do if one of you speaks up and it's different than what I'm looking for. I'll ignore you and go on. So in all of this moral darkness, there is a bright spot, a pocket of good news. Chapter 6, verse 8. I'm going to read it in two I have two versions. I call them versions, two paraphrases, the Message first and then the Living. This is the Message. But Noah was different. God liked what he saw in Noah. And same verse, Noah was a pleasure to the Lord. I love that. So would you circle the words, but Noah? Did you know that those two words saved the human race, by the way? So I am wondering, would God save the world because of you? Would God look at your life and say, but, and then you put your name in the place of Noah? So on three, I'm going to count to three. 1, 2, 3, and we're all going to say but, and then you put your name in it. 1, 2, 3, but Bruce. Ha ha! I made you all say but. So there are only two people who have ever saved the world. Noah, who saved it physically, and Jesus Christ, who came and died on the cross and saved it spiritually. It says in chapter 6 and verse 9, he was the only truly righteous man living on the earth at the time. Let's just let that verse stand for what it says. Could there be like a little bit of hyperbole in here when you say, I just had the greatest person in all the world, and you just mean really, really good? Maybe, but let's just let it stand for what it says. Imagine being the only righteous person on earth. Well, one thing is for sure, you're definitely not going to fit in the crowd morally. And your number one goal is not what will other people think, but what does God want? Is there a biblical principle that I can follow? So is the trend and direction of society today toward biblical morals? My answer would be, it is not. So I have a couple of things that I want to recommend to you. This is primarily for preteens and teenagers. And I've looked at it closely, so as a parent, I think you will be accepting of this. I wouldn't put anything that I wasn't sure about or had questions about. I don't want to take over your position of parenting. But in a society where the trend and direction is away from God, it's always encouraging to find these pockets of good news and pockets of people doing good things. The first item on your outline is a video that you can go to on YouTube. It's 2.5 minutes. It is Jace and Missy Robertson. They are well known from the TV show Duck Dynasty. Many of you may know of them, members of the Church of Christ in Monroe, Louisiana. And they were interviewed on the TV show E.T. Entertainment Tonight. And Jace and Missy Robertson talked about how they saved themselves sexually for marriage. I mean, it's very counterculture, but they're real funny. Chase and Missy are funny. They're humorous. They're so into each other and love each other. So it's a great little clip. It's just like a pocket in a sea of immorality. The second item is an article. It's written by Audrey Roloff. Audrey and Jeremy Roloff are a part of the clan on the TV show Little People, Big World. And they have a farm in Oregon that they work. And Audrey wrote an article and talked about how she and now her husband decided not to live together before they were married. And it's just this pocket of morality. Very encouraging. I read another article, and I didn't put this in the bulletin. This lady is somewhere between 30 and 50 years of age. She's a professional writer who lives in the Northeast. And she was writing about people living together before marriage, and it had nothing to do with morality. It was an article. And in it, she said that she does not know of a single couple who did not live together before they were married. To put it another way, every married couple she knows, without exception, lived together before they were married, and she doesn't even know what the fuss is. Because that's her perspective on it. So, our moral values, we don't want them set by society, but by biblical principles. And then antidote number 2 is I must believe God's promises. I must believe God's promises. In Genesis 6:3, the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years." So from the time God instructed Noah to build the ark to the time that he sent the flood was 120 years, a long time to wait for a promise to be fulfilled, right? Now, I'm sure, because I know human nature and you know human nature, that there were people who misunderstood what Noah was doing. After all, the guy is building the Queen Mary in his front yard for a flood that had never happened before, building this gigantic boat 450 feet long, 45 feet high. You know, every subdivision has that strange house in the cul-de-sac. That strange house. And it looks all year long, it looks like it's just right for trick-or-treating. A little creepy, a little scary, you never can see inside. The trees coming down on everything, everything's kind of hidden. And you know, you walk by, you just go quickly to get on past this. So I don't know if his house was necessarily like that. But it must have been very strange to see this giant boat being built. Because Genesis 2 says it never rained before. They had thunderstorms, like we have thunderstorms, about, every 35 or 40 minutes, depending on where you are. It says that a mist was used to water the ground. Very different climate before the flood. So these folks, they don't have a clue what Noah is doing. Our lives may not be quite as dramatic as Noah's, but we do have the promise of heaven. And we can't give up on that promise simply because culture thinks religion is irrelevant. Especially the kind we believe in, where we accept the Bible as the ultimate authority of God for all things pertaining to life and godliness. So in Hebrews 11:7, we're going forward now to the book of Hebrews. It was by faith that Noah heard God's warnings about things he could not yet see. He couldn't see it. He obeyed God and built a large boat. Noah obeyed God even when he couldn't see the end result, and you and I need to be willing to do the same. And that's easier said than done. It is not easy to live in a culture that focuses on short-term thinking more than long-term thinking. Our society says, have pleasure now, live for today, have fun right now. And we have to counter that and focus on God's future promises for us. Hebrews 11:7, second part of that verse. Noah's belief was in direct contrast to the sin and disbelief of the rest of the world. So would you circle direct contrast? When the world says we're foolish and stupid for believing in the Bible and living by its promises, would you remember Noah? So I must believe in God's promises. And then antidote number 3. I must do exactly as God instructs. Exactly as God instructs. When the instructions are clear. This is Genesis 6:9. Noah tried to conduct his affairs according to God's will. Now I would like for you to circle the word try. Do you try to conduct your affairs according to God's will? Now His will is not going to always be clear. I understand. There's not always going to be a clear direction when it comes to choosing a career or choosing someone to marry. I understand not everything is absolute and exact. But do you follow His principles when they are clearly stated in His Word? I'm just talking about the clear stuff. I'm not talking about the things that may be in the gray area and are a little shaded and there's room for differences of opinion. In Genesis 6:22, and then it's repeated again in chapter 7 and verse 5. Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. Exactly. Would you circle the word exactly? I'm sure he had some questions along the way. What's a flood? You say you're saying about what's a flood? Since we mentioned earlier it hadn't rained before. What's a flood? How do you build an ark? You could go to Google and Google build an ark. Now, if we're going to build an ark, I'm going to Google it first and find some good plans on somewhere on a website on how to build an ark. There was no Lowe's, there was no Home Depot workshop on building an ark. You know how they have those Home Depot workshops? You can go and know how to pour concrete or how to do different things. They didn't have any of those on the ark, about the ark. 3, how am I going to get this boat to water? How am I going to drag this thing 25 miles down to the Gulf of Mexico? Oh, little did he know God was bringing the water. He didn't have to worry about water. I'm sure something else that concerned him was how am I going to gather all the animals? God wants 2 of every biological classification of kind, which is larger than a species. He wants 2 of every kind. How are you going to go about doing that? I mean, how can you even tell a male from a female, like mosquito? I think the females bite, but that's beside the point. That may be true. How are you going to handle all that? I got a lot of questions because I'm a detail person. I want to know how I'm going to handle the details. So what does this have to do with your life? We have to be willing to obey God in the clear things He teaches, even though they may not, may not make total sense to us. Because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense to me. For example, love your enemies. Love your enemies. Clear enough. Clear enough. Easy to do. Not always. Not always. Pray for those who persecute you. Come on, give me a break. Pray for those who persecute me. Be baptized for the forgiveness of your sins. I don't know. My religious group says that you don't have to do that. So we have to be willing to obey in the clear teachings God has given us, although they may not always make that much sense to us. So, obey as God instructs. 4, I must never give up on God's promises. It seems like a lot of things in life take longer than we are wanting to wait. Have you noticed that? We want things to happen right now. 120 years is a long time, 43,800 days he had to wait. He may have faced loneliness, fatigue, but he kept going. Now I know he lived to 900, so 120 was only a part of that, so I've converted it to our lifespans. We're looking at 10, 15, 20 years. That's still a long time to wait. Hebrews 11:7. When Noah heard God's warning about the future, he believed in him, even though there was no sign of a flood. There's no sign of a flood. And wasting no time, he built the ark and saved his family. This is not the retirement he had set up for, that he had signed up for. He wasn't looking for this in retirement. The Bible says he was 600 when he entered the ark, so go back 120, started building on the ark when he was 480. The guy has been on Social Security for 500 years. 500 years, ever since he was like 67, he took it to the max, you know, to get the most amount, so he went to 67 or whatever it is. And he's been on that Social Security for hundreds and hundreds of years. And he was enjoying retirement and having a good time. And now this ark thing has come along. And his wife would ask him, honey, how was work today? And Noah said, well, baby, it was the same thing, same place. We put a few more boards on both. So God's message to you is don't give up your faith even when there is no sign of fulfillment. And remember that God is in the control of the final chapter of your life, even though it now seems out of control. Genesis 6:9. Oh, how about Galatians 6:9? I saw the G and was thinking Genesis. Galatians. Let us not get tired of doing what is right, for after a while we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't get discouraged and give up. So for me, the most difficult part of this verse is the part that I underline. It's the after a while. That's tough. It's waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. Now I'm going to make a statement, but I'm not intending to discourage you by this statement. This is not intended to be a source of discouragement, but rather I hope it's encouraging because we want to put everything in the context of reality. There may be a lot of things that you're waiting for that God hasn't promised. I know Noah had this direct promise, and if you and I had the direct promise, everyone in this room would gladly wait 120 years. We know it's coming. God directly told us. But there's a lot of things we're waiting for in life that we haven't really been promised. The higher paying job, a lot of things, folks. But don't give up your faith in God. That's the important thing. Amen. And you can continue to believe. And God will answer one way or another. And we're going to do a series on prayer in about a month or two. And we'll talk about some of the ways that God answers our prayers. What is interesting to me, and probably to you too as Christians, is that the ark, Noah's ark, did you know that it is a symbol of our salvation in Jesus Christ? Look at 1 Peter 3:20. In the ark, only a few people. How many people? 8. 8 in all. Were saved through water, and this water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also. So I'd like for you to circle through water. Circle the prepositional phrase through water. Could be by water. I was reading a commentary. And the commentator didn't believe that baptism was something that was necessary. So he made the point that Noah was saved by staying out of the water. And you can be saved too by staying out of the water. I get what he's saying. And yes, it is true, Noah stayed out of the water. But that's not what this verse is saying. It says, he was saved through water, by water. So we need to get the illustration straight. So here's a comment on that through water. Two things. Number one, the water saved Noah because it was the element that supported the ark and kept him safe. Number two, the water washed away all the sins of the earth, just like baptism does. A lot of religious groups don't teach baptism as the point of salvation. What I say to that is the majority is not always right. It wasn't right in Noah's day. They're not necessarily right today. Look at this last passage, Hebrews 11:7. By his faith, Noah showed that the world was wrong. The world, our culture, our society cannot be dependent on to get it right when it comes to God's Word. It is something you have to take a look at. You have to read and study and make a decision about. God has given us the ability to be logical, rational human beings. And if you come to the Bible with an open mind, I think there are some basic core conclusions that you will reach and that we can agree upon. A very interesting study on Noah. Chuck is making his way up to the front, and if you have a particular, hey, before you come there, I had that, let me show you this. I just thought it was cute. I found this, 1 Peter 3:20, the ark was being prepared in which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. There's Noah up there. Guess he had a beard. Does it say he had a beard? No. 1 Peter 3:21, there is also an antitype or a symbol of that which now saves us, baptism through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Beautiful illustration. If you have a particular need, please let us know what it is while we stand and sing.